welcome to Thar's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the XRAY GTXE 23 edition, bag 10, the electronics. So let's get started. So you're gonna need your electronics, servo, ESC, receiver. Set that aside for now. So first what we're gonna do is open up our hardware and our bag 10, and then we're going to put together the steering arm. Be careful opening up this bag because there are some small screws in there. You don't want to lose anything. So the first thing we're going to do is put together the steering arm with the servo horn. So since my servo is a 25 tooth servo, we're going to use the F servo horn because that denotes the 25 teeth. So I have that. We're also going to need an M3x12 screw. So now we can assemble this together. So take your shock tool and install the balls in the rod ends. Now there is a notch on here, and that should denote the left-hand thread, and it looks like it is left-hand threaded on that side. So take note of that. I'm gonna go ahead and put a small dab of oil on there, and that should help thread on the rod end. And the same thing for the other side. Okay, so you want to have an 8.5 millimeter gap between the two shoulders. So we're going to tighten this down until we get 8.5 millimeters. All right, I'm at 8.4. I think it's close enough. Once this is on the car, I can go ahead and adjust it if needed. So now we're going to install the arm onto the servo horn, and the way it's going to install is actually going to be on the bottom of the horn, so take note of that. So you have your spline and it's going to install like so. There you go, everything moves nice and smooth. So now we can install this onto the servo. So off camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up my servo onto another car, make sure it's centered, and then we can go ahead and install this. All right, so we have the servo centered. Now we're going to need the servo plate. We're also going to need 4 M3x12 screws and 4 3.2 shims. Along with those, we're going to need these plastic pieces that the screws are going to screw into. And the other thing that we're going to need is a screw that's going to hold the servo arm into the servo, and that is not included, so check your servo packaging and see if you have something that'll work. Good. Fortunately, the 170 SBL came with some hardware that we can use, so we're all set. So take note of the orientation when installing everything. So let's go ahead and install the servo arm first. Looks like it's going to install like so. And because it's 25 tooth, it's not gonna sit, 90 degrees from this direction. It's gonna be off just a little bit, and we can use our trim function in the radio to fix that. And I like to add just a little bit of blue Loctite on this screw, because I've had it happen to me where the screw has backed off during a race, causing me not to finish. So now we can install this onto this plate. So take note of the orientation on how it's going to install. And we're gonna put a washer or shim on each and every one of these screws that we have. And take note of these plastic pieces. There's a flat that's fully rectangular on one side, and on the other side you see that it has kind of an undercut. So we want this undercut to be facing down, and we're going to throw it in from the top. So you put your screw in, and then we're going to go ahead and screw into the plastic piece like so. Just make sure everything is going in straight, and you can start tightening it down. I'll leave it a little loose for now until we install the other side. Same thing goes on this side, same orientation. Okay, so we're going to tighten this side first, because it's just the hole on this side. It's kind of a oval shape hole, so it allows it to move front and back. And you're going into plastic, so you don't need to crank down on it. Once it's snugged, it's pretty good to go. And there we go. Now we can move on to the next step, where we're going to need these posts. There's going to be 3 of them. Bless you. So take note of the orientation, because you have flats on here. Those flats are going to be facing down on all of them. And so these are going to install with 3 M3x8 screws in these holes. Okay, so the image is wrong in the manual. It shows that the M3x8 screws are going to go on this side where the flat isn't close to, but as you can see, like the screw just goes right through. So the actual thread that it's supposed to go through is the side that does have the flat. So take note of that when you do install it. And since this is going into aluminum, I will be adding some thread locker. So with those screws installed, this assembly is now ready to install onto the chassis. So we have our chassis, and now these 3 posts are going to install in these 3 holes. And we're going to use 3 M4x12 flathead screws. And we're also going to need one M3 by 14 screw and one M3 lock nut. So these screws are going to be going into aluminum. So I'm going to go ahead and put some blue Loctite on there. So the holes we're going to be installing them in are here, here, and here. So you can go ahead and line up the holes. And we can go ahead and tighten it down. So now we can go ahead and install our screw for the steering arm to the bell crank. So if you see the bottom of this bell crank where the servo arm attaches, it's hexagonal, so that M3 lock nut will go ahead and just fit right in. So you won't need to use a wrench as a backup when you need to tighten down. So with that installed, you can take your M3 by 14 screw and thread it in. Okay, everything moves nice and smooth. See the thread is in the nylock, so we're good. Now we can install the Esc and receiver plate. There's going to be this item right here. We're going to need two M3 by 10 flathead screws. And the orientation this is going to install is going to be like so. And it looks like it's going to install in these two holes here and here. It's probably easier to flip the car over, and we're going to install the two M3 by 10 flathead screws in this hole and this hole. So take your Esc plate and just line it up and go ahead and install your screws. To tighten it down too hard, you're going into plastic. So once you feel it snug up, it's good. All right. With that installed, we can install our Esc and receiver. Before I install the Esc and receiver, I'm going to go ahead and install the battery trays. And then before I install the Esc, I'm going to solder the wires onto the Esc before I install it, because the orientation I want to install it is probably going to be like so. And I'm afraid that I'm not going to have as good access to these points. So I'm going to do that before I stick it on. Even though I can remove the Esc plate, but I want to do that before I install this. So, all right, so to install the battery trays, we're gonna need 4 M3 by 25 screws, 4 M4 by 10 flathead screws, 4 M4 nuts. So we're going to take the M4 nuts and go ahead and install it into the battery tray itself. There's a hexagonal cutout in the battery tray, so the nuts will just drop in like so. We're also going to need these little battery tie downs. Need 4 of those. So the battery trays are going to utilize these holes here. Flip the chassis and tighten down all the screws. So it's going to be these 4 screws here. Alright, there are some little nubs on these pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and trim them. I don't know which battery packs I'm going to use just yet, but there's an orientation for a low battery pack and a standard battery pack. I think I'm going to be using low battery packs. So I'm going to install the little battery strap in this orientation right here. Alright, the battery straps installed, battery boxes are in. Now I'm going to go ahead and solder on the wires onto my ESC, and we can go ahead and install our ESC and receiver once that is done, and go from there. All right. So I'm going to set the chassis aside. So I'm going to go ahead and use my new soldering station, this Yahoo soldering station I got off Amazon. I think it's a pretty nice soldering station for the money. Heats up really quickly. So for example, I'm turning it on now. And I'm gonna set it to 750 degrees. It's already at 500 degrees. 600 degrees. 700 degrees. 750. So it's pretty quick to heat up. It's a nice soldering station. I've used it a few times already, so I think it's well worth the money. I spent about 40 bucks on it, so highly recommend it. I'll put a link down in the description below where you can check out the information and pick one up. So we're gonna go ahead and tin all these connections and install the wires. Grab the wire for the motor and the power wires as well. So we can go ahead and install these onto the ESC. Nice wire, nice and flexible. So I want to make sure that they are cut to the proper length, which they are. Looks like one side is a little longer than the other, so take note of that if you're following along. The wires are pre-tinned, so I'm going to go ahead and tin this side, and then we'll put the wires on. Alright, the ESC is now ready to install onto the chassis. I'm going to take some alcohol and clean off all the surfaces before I stick on the double-sided tape. Alright, so I'm going to push it as far back as I can, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of space so that way it's not touching the servo mount. Decided to install it here rather than on the side or anything like that, just because I want to try to keep it inboard just in case it falls off or something like that while it's running, and if it gets torn off, that would kind of be bad because it'll turn off the car. Ask me how I know, it's happened to me. And for the receiver, I just put it as kind of flush with the edge so it gives clearance for the arm, and it's good. Now I can work on wiring everything. I think I'm going to keep the wires a little on the long side, so that way it pushes the wire back and gives, you know, it doesn't give the appearance that it's right on top of the servo. So looks like that'll probably be good right there. Alright, so most of the wiring is done. Seems nice and neat. Nothing excessive. Hopefully nothing's going to get caught on anything. So we can move on. So that was it for Bag 10, the electronics. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Please leave any comments down below if you think there's an easier way to do this or a cleaner way to do this. I'd definitely appreciate that, and I'm sure others would as well. Stay tuned for the next video where I assembled bag 11, the shock absorbers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.